The first morning after Thomas's funeral, the world felt hollow. Not empty, but as if it had exhaled and forgotten how to breathe again. The Montana sky hung low, the air sharp enough to taste. Out across the barren field, the snow still held faint footprints, his, fading into the ridge where they found him. For 30 years, Thomas and I had built our life here, a simple ranch on the outskirts of Bozeman. We'd raised horses, planted trees, and learned how to read the moods of the wind like old friends. Ours was a life measured in seasons, not calendars. And then one cold morning in February, that rhythm stopped. They said he died of a heart attack while checking the fence line. The sheriff told me there were no signs of struggle, no suspicious tracks, nothing to suggest foul play. But I knew my husband. Thomas Merritt didn't just drop. He'd been healthy, cautious, deliberate, with a heart as strong as the mountains he loved. What unsettled me most wasn't his death, it was what came before it. In the months leading up to it, Thomas had changed. He was quieter, distracted. He'd taken up photography again, his old passion from college days. Every evening he'd be out with his vintage Nikon, shooting the ridge line or the creek under the moonlight. At first I thought it was healing, a man finding beauty again in the everyday. But soon I noticed how secretive he'd become. He'd come home late, mud on his boots, refusing to say where he'd been. Sometimes he'd stop mid-dinner, glance out the window as if hearing something I couldn't. Once I found him developing photos in the darkroom we hadn't used in years. When I asked what he was working on, he said only, "Just the truth, Rachel." Then one day, he was gone. The call came from the sheriff's office just after sunrise. I remember every word, every pause. "Mrs. Merritt, we found your husband near the north fence. I'm sorry, ma'am, he didn't make it." When they brought him home, his hands were still cold, but his camera, that old Nikon, hung around his neck, lens cracked but intact. The coroner ruled it a heart attack, no autopsy beyond the basics. I wanted to believe that. God, I did. But when I picked up that camera, something inside me stirred. The last photo on the roll wasn't of a mountain or a sunrise. It was a blurred shot of something metallic, a car's bumper maybe, and faint headlights reflecting off the snow. I remember whispering to myself, "Who were you watching, Thomas?" Weeks turned into months. The world moved on, but I couldn't. The silence of our ranch wasn't peace anymore. It was accusation. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the trees felt like him trying to tell me something. Then one morning, while cleaning the attic, I found a small box tucked behind old Christmas decorations. Inside were 4 undeveloped rolls of film, labeled in his neat handwriting. South Ridge, Week 40. Creek Road, Night Shots. North Access, 4 a.m. Unknown Vehicle, 2:12. My hands shook. That was 2 days before his death. I stared at those rolls for a long time. Fear told me to leave them alone. But love, the kind that doesn't fade with death, told me otherwise. I drove them into town that same afternoon. The road was slick with late snow, the sky bruised with twilight. I stopped at Grant's Photo Supply, the same shop Thomas had always used. Norm Grant looked up from behind the counter when I walked in, his smile fading when he saw the box. "Rachel," he said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come by." "You knew he left film undeveloped?" He nodded. "Thomas came in a few times that last month, said he was working on something important." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "He told me if anything ever happened, I should make sure the photos got to you." My heart stuttered. "Did he say why?" "No, just that it mattered." He developed the rolls while I waited, the steady hum of the machine filling the silence between us. When he returned, He didn't hand them to me right away. His face was pale. "Rachel," he said, "whatever Thomas was looking into, it wasn't just landscapes." He slid the photos across the counter. The first few were harmless: hills under moonlight, the frozen creek, our barn from a distance. But then the pattern shifted. A black SUV parked along the access road, tire tracks near the fence line, a pair of men standing under the old cottonwood tree at dawn, their faces barely visible, but one looked disturbingly familiar. I leaned closer. The man on the left wore a tan overcoat, his face turned toward the camera just enough for the light to catch the edge of his jaw. I knew that jaw. Harold Stone. The county commissioner. And standing beside him, gesturing toward our property fence, was Ethan Merritt, my brother-in-law. My throat went dry. What were they doing out there? Norm hesitated. I don't know, but there's something else. That SUV. I checked the plate. It's registered to Clearview Energy Partners out of Denver. They've been buying land across the county, quietly. I blinked. Energy company? Why would they? They're prepping a new gas line, Rachel, the one that town council's been debating for months. It had cut straight through your property. My pulse began to pound. Thomas must have found out. Looks that way. I looked down at the last photo in the stack. It was different from the rest. Grainier, darker. The same SUV. Headlights off. Parked near the creek at 2:03 a.m. And faintly visible behind it, another figure. Watching. My husband's last frame. When I got home that night, I found an envelope taped to my door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed, "Stop asking questions. Let him rest." There was a greasy fingerprint on the corner and the faint smell of gasoline. For a long moment, I stood there on my porch, staring out into the darkness beyond the field. The snow was falling again, soft and quiet, like nothing bad could ever happen here. But deep down, I knew better. Someone had killed my husband, and they'd just told me to keep quiet. That was their first mistake. For 2 nights after finding that note, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me sit upright, heart racing. Even the horses seemed restless, their hooves clattering nervously against the stable boards as if they too could sense the air had changed. The photographs lay spread across the kitchen table, illuminated by the flicker of a single lamp. I studied them again and again, as if staring long enough could force them to reveal something new. A license plate digit, a face caught between shadows. But one detail caught my attention, something I had missed before. In one of the shots of the SUV, reflected faintly in the driver's side mirror, was another vehicle. My vehicle. Which meant Thomas hadn't just stumbled onto them by chance. He'd been tracking them. The next morning I called Ethan, my late husband's younger brother. He picked up on the second ring, his tone polite but clipped, like someone expecting a debt collector. "Rachel, it's been a while. I need to see you. It's about Thomas." A long pause. "Rachel, we've been over this. He's gone. It was a heart attack. I have his photographs." That stopped him cold. "His what?" "4 roles developed." Another pause. Then quieter. "Where are you?" We met later that afternoon at the diner just off Highway 191. The snow had thinned into slush, and the roads gleamed with dirty ice. Ethan looked older than I remembered. Gray stubble, deep creases around the eyes. He'd always been the charming one, the talker, the man who could turn a lie into poetry. He slid into the booth opposite me, removing his gloves. "You shouldn't have gone digging through his things, Rachel." "Then maybe you can explain why you were out by the north fence 2 days before he died." His face didn't move. "You're mistaken. I opened my purse and slid the photograph across the table. The diner's fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead as he looked down. He didn't even blink. "Where'd you get this?" Thomas took it, along with a few others. He was following someone. Maybe you. His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't talk like that. People might think grief's making you paranoid." "I'm not paranoid. I'm prepared." He leaned back, smirking. "That's a dangerous thing to be in this town." Something in his tone made my stomach turn. For years, I'd seen him as a family, a brother. But now, across that sticky furniture table, I saw what Thomas must have seen. A man trying very hard to hide the truth. Thomas found something, didn't he? Ethan's eyes flicked toward the window, toward the parking lot. "You don't want to know, Rachel. Trust me." That was his mistake. He thought warning me would make me stop. Instead, it made me certain. That night I drove home in a daze, the headlights cutting through fog like thin white knives. The house was cold when I got there, colder than usual. I turned on the porch light and froze. There, on the step, sat a cardboard box. No label, no note, just my name scrawled across it in thick black marker. Inside were ashes, the remains of burnt photographs, in a small melted piece of metal that used to be part of a camera lens. A warning. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. Norm answered on the second ring. "Rachel? They know. Someone burned something. They were here." He was silent for a moment. "Listen to me. You can't stay there that night. Come into town. I'll meet you at the shop." When I arrived, he was waiting outside, smoking nervously in the snow. He motioned me inside and locked the door behind us. The air smelled faintly of chemicals and coffee. He said, "I did some digging. That company, Clearview Energy Partners, they've been buying up land from Belgrade all the way down to Livingston. Every plot. Except one. Our ranch." He nodded. "Thomas found out they were drilling exploratory wells without permits. There's a gas pocket under your land worth millions. He was documenting proof that they'd already started leaking waste into the creek." I sank into a chair, the room spinning slightly. "So he was right." Norm nodded. "Yeah, and that makes him dangerous, even now." We drove out to the ridge together that night, flashlights in hand, following the same path Thomas must have taken. The snow crunched underfoot, the silence immense. Half a mile north, near the old fence post, we found it. Tire ruts, partially frozen, leading into a clearing. And there, half buried in frost, was a metal pipe protruding from the ground, capped and marked with a single red tag. "Clearview, test site number 17. "Jesus Christ," Norm muttered. He wasn't imagining it. I crouched down, brushing the frost from the tag. There were traces of oily residue along the base, the faint smell of chemicals. Thomas had taken photos of this. He'd been trying to stop them. I felt something inside me shift, that same cold calm that had once steadied me through funerals and losses now turned to something sharper. Purpose. They thought they could bury him with their lies, but I had the truth. In film, in print, in my hands. Over the next week, I went through everything Thomas had left behind, his notebooks, the storage shed, his desk drawers. Tucked beneath an old map of the valley, I found a small envelope sealed with duct tape. Inside was a single key labeled Bank Box 212, Bozeman First National. When I went to the bank, the clerk hesitated before handing it over. She said, "This was opened under both your names. He came by a few days before he passed." Inside the box were 3 things: a small digital recorder, a manila folder labeled Evidence, and one final roll of undeveloped film. My heart pounded. The folder contained photocopies of land contracts, survey maps, and emails between county officials and Clearview executives, including one with Ethan's signature, authorizing a private access route. The last page was a memo titled Merritt Property Acquisition, Urgent Timeline. Under action items were 2 words: Final Persuasion. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I clicked play on the recorder. Thomas's voice filled the small bank booth, soft, steady, heartbreakingly calm. If you're hearing this, Rachel, it means they got to me. But don't be afraid. Everything you need is here. Ethan's involved. So is Stone. They want the land, for the gas beneath it. I've contacted a journalist in Billings. Her name is Mara Ellis. Trust her. Tell her everything. And don't let them make you feel crazy. My throat tightened, tears spilling hot and fast. He'd known it. He'd planned for this. My husband had been murdered, and he'd left me the trail to justice. That night, I sat alone at our kitchen table, the recorder still playing softly in the background, the snow tapping against the window like quiet applause. I whispered to his photo on the wall, "They wanted to silence you, Thomas. But now, they'll have to hear me." I didn't sleep the night I heard Thomas's voice. It looped in my head like a heartbeat. Don't let them make you feel crazy. That was exactly what they were trying to do. And until that moment, it was almost working. By dawn, the decision was made. I was going to find Mara Ellis, the journalist Thomas had trusted. Her name came up easily on Google. Investigative reporter based in Billings, Montana. She'd covered environmental corruption cases, small-town officials taking bribes from energy corporations, the usual big fish eat small pond story that never made it past the local press. When I called her newsroom, the receptionist said she was out of town. But later that evening, my phone buzzed. "Rachel Merritt?" The voice was low, direct, with a trace of curiosity. "This is Mara Ellis. You said you're Thomas Merritt's widow?" "Yes." My voice shook, but I steadied it. "He left something for you. Recordings, photos, documents." There was a pause. "He said if I ever heard from you, it meant he was dead." The room spun for a moment. I gripped the counter. "Then you know what this is about." "I know Clearview Energy doesn't like witnesses," Mara said quietly. "Can you meet me somewhere public?" We agreed to meet the next morning at a coffee shop in Bozeman. Neutral ground, open space, lots of eyes. It was a cold, blue morning, the kind that makes the sky feel endless and merciless. Mara was exactly how I imagined. Early 40s, sharp eyes, no makeup, a reporter's face, tired but alert. She didn't waste time. What you have could blow open a multi-million-dollar fraud case, but it'll also put a target on your back. I said, "They've already been here," showing her the photo of the burned box. Her gaze hardened. "Then we don't have much time." I handed her the folder, the recorder, and the last undeveloped roll of film. She flipped through the documents like she was scanning a bomb manual. This is good." She said, "There's bribery, zoning fraud, illegal drilling, but we'll need proof that your husband's death wasn't natural." I swallowed hard. "How do we get that?" She said, "Start with the autopsy. I'll request a copy through my sources. In the meantime, go home and act normal. Don't tell anyone you met with me, especially relatives.
The first thing people like Vance do is turn relatives against you. I wanted to argue, but I could already feel the truth of her words pressing down. When I got home, my brother-in-law Ethan's truck was already in the driveway.
He stood on the porch, pretending to admire the snow-covered field. "Morning," I said stiffly. "Rachel," he greeted with that easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Heard you've been keeping busy, visiting the bank, the camera shop, even a reporter." My stomach dropped. "Who told you that?" "Small town, sweetheart. People talk." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're treading dangerous ground. Let Thomas rest." "He didn't rest," I snapped. "He fought until his last breath, trying to expose what you and Clearview were doing. I know you were in on it." The smile vanished. For the first time, I saw the real Ethan, a man whose charm was nothing more than a mask for control. "Careful," he said quietly. "Words like that could get you committed, or worse." He turned, walked back to his truck, and drove off, leaving his threat hanging in the frozen air. That night, I locked every door, double-checked every window, and slept with the phone on my nightstand. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to a sound, a car engine idling outside. I pulled the curtain back just enough to see headlights parked at the end of my driveway. They stayed there for several minutes, long enough for me to memorize the shape of the vehicle, a black SUV, the same kind Thomas had photographed. I called Mara. She answered instantly. "They're watching me," I whispered. "Then you're close," she said. "Stay inside. I'll handle the next step." By morning, Mara had emailed me a single-page autopsy summary she'd obtained through a contact in the coroner's office. Cause of death: myocardial infarction, heart attack. Notes: slight trace of industrial solvents detected in blood, dismissed as environmental contamination. I froze. Solvents? Mara's reply came within seconds. Benzene compounds, used in hydraulic fracturing and drilling fluid. He was poisoned. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. Thomas hadn't just been silenced, he'd been eliminated. We needed proof, so we went back to where it all started, the creek. It was mid-afternoon, the sunlight cutting pale lines through the pines. Mara brought a sampling kit. We collected water near the pipe Thomas had photographed. The chemical smell was still faint, but distinct. "We'll get this tested," Mara said. "If it matches what was in his blood, it's over for them." I nodded, my throat tight. "He always said the land talks to you if you listen hard enough." Maybe he was right. As we hiked back, I saw a black SUV parked along the ridge again, no plates this time, just tinted windows and a driver watching us. Mara noticed too. "Keep walking," she murmured. "Don't react." That night, I received an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. One of the pictures Thomas had taken, the one showing the SUV and the two men meeting near the fence. Across the top, written in red ink, were 4 words: "Stop digging or you're next." I drove to Bozeman's apartment in Bozeman the next morning, my hands trembling the whole way. She was already up, sitting at her cluttered desk, surrounded by open files. "This means they're scared," she said, studying the photo. "Fear is proof of guilt." "But they're powerful, Mara. They own the sheriff, the courts." "Then we go higher. The state attorney's office. I have a contact in Helena who owes me a favor." For the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't dread. It was hope.
Faint, but alive. 2 days later, Mara's lab results came back. The water sample contained benzene and toluene at 50 times the legal limit. She cross-referenced the results with the autopsy report. Identical compounds. Mara exhaled sharply. "We've got them, Rachel." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She answered and froze. "What?" I asked. Her face went pale. "That was my editor. Someone broke into the newsroom. They trashed my files, everything on Clearview." My heart dropped. "What about your backups?" "In the cloud," she said quickly, "but this means we need to move fast." She started typing furiously. "I'm sending everything to 3 national outlets. They can't silence all of them." I watched her, my pulse hammering. "And if they come for us?" She gave a small, fearless smile. "Then we make sure the truth gets out before they do." That night, I returned home to find my door wide open. My living room had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, paper scattered, the frame around Thomas's photograph shattered. But on the wall above the mantel, the intruder had left something, a small strip of photo paper burned at the edges. When I held it up to the light, I saw what it was. A photograph of Thomas, standing at the same creek, camera in hand. A warning and a challenge. I looked up at the ceiling, heart pounding. "You took him from me. Now I'll take everything from you." The morning after the break-in, the house didn't feel like home anymore. The air carried the sour scent of fear, stale coffee, splintered wood, the faint chemical tang of soil tracked in by boots that weren't mine. But beneath that fear was a new stubborn current of rage. They had come into my home, touched the last remnants of Thomas's life, and still believed I'd fold. They were wrong. I drove straight to Bozeman, to Mara's office. Her eyes were bloodshot, her coffee cold. She'd been up all night. "They're escalating," she said. "That means we're hitting something real. The break-ins, the intimidation, it's textbook." I slid the burned photo across her desk. "They left this behind," I said, my voice steady. She studied it. "A warning. Or a mistake," I said, "because it proves they were here." Mara's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I like the way you think."
That afternoon, she uploaded everything. Photos, lab reports, audio, legal documents to encrypted drives stored in multiple off-site servers. Then she hit send on a single email addressed to 3 news outlets: the Washington Herald, the Tribune, and ProPublica. Subject line: urgent. Environmental corruption, Clearview Energy, Montana political ties. Evidence enclosed. Once that button clicked, there was no turning back. The backlash started almost immediately. First came the anonymous phone calls. A man's voice, muffled and measured. "Stop lying about good people, Mrs. Merritt. You're smearing your husband's legacy." Then the articles. The local newspaper, long in the Vance's pocket, ran a front-page piece. Grieving widow spreads false claims. Mental health concerns cited. They quoted neighbors, some of whom I'd known for decades. "She's been acting strange since her husband passed," one said. Another, "Always been a bit dramatic, probably lonely." Each word chipped away at my reputation, but it didn't break me. It just confirmed how deep the rot went. A few days later, Sheriff Halverson showed up at my door, polite, pitying, and armed with a wellness check order. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Your children filed the request." "My children?" I said, my voice hollow. "Marcus and Emily." He nodded. "They worried about you.
Said you're seeing things, accusing people. You've been through a lot of stress. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They'd gotten to my own kids. Thomas's voice echoed in my head. Don't trust anyone. I forced a calm smile. I appreciate your concern, Sheriff. I'm perfectly fine. Would you like to see my doctor's note? He blinked, thrown off. You have one? I do now. I handed him a neatly folded document, a mental evaluation I'd arranged weeks earlier when I first felt the walls closing in. My therapist, Dr. Lane, had written a glowing report. He read it, cleared his throat, and left without another word. When the door closed, I finally let my shoulders shake. It wasn't fear this time. It was fury. That night, Mara called with news that both terrified and vindicated me. The Herald bit, she said breathlessly. They're sending a field reporter. Rachel, this is real. The story's going national. For a long moment, I just stared out the window at the endless black fields, the stars stretching like pinpricks of hope. Thomas would have smiled at that. 2 days later, a man named Cal Roberts showed up on my porch. He was younger than I had expected, mid-30s, sharp, a camera slung over his shoulder, press badge clipped to his jacket. Mrs. Merritt, he said, extending a hand, I'm here to tell your story. I hesitated. And what kind of story do you want to tell? The true one, the one they've been trying to bury. We spent hours talking, him recording every detail, me reliving every wound. Thomas's discovery, the SUV, the blackmail, the threats, the poisoning. At one point, I showed him the undeveloped roll of film Thomas had left behind. Cal's eyes lit up. Mind if I take this to a lab I trust? If there's something on here, it might be the missing piece. I nodded, handing it over like a sacred relic. It's all I have left. The next morning, Mara called, her voice sharp with alarm. They know about the story. The Herald is under pressure. Legal threats, smear campaigns, even bribes. If we don't go public now, they'll bury it. So what do we do? She hesitated. We leak it ourselves. Direct upload, full archive, time-stamped. Once it's online, it can't be erased. I thought of Thomas, quiet, methodical, always one step ahead. He would have done the same thing. Do it, I said. Let the world see. That evening, the story went live under a simple headline, The Last Frame. How a Montana farmer died, exposing a multi-million-dollar cover-up. The article included everything, the photos, the chemical reports, the recorded threats, the corrupt land deals. My name was there. My face, too. There was no going back. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with hashtags, hashtag the last frame, hashtag justice for Thomas, hashtag Clearview corruption. By morning, it hit national cable. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox. The FBI announced a preliminary investigation. And that's when the tide turned. Ethan called that night, the first time in weeks. You think this is over? He growled. You think the FBI scares us? No, I said softly, but the truth does. He was silent. Then, in a low voice, you should have stayed quiet. I learned that from Thomas. Silence kills. And I hung up. For 3 tense days, the nation watched. Politicians scrambled, lawyers resigned, and the Vance family name, once untouchable, began to crumble. Then came the warrant. Federal agents raided Clearview Energy and the Millbrook development offices. They seized files, hard drives, drilling contracts, and one very specific ledger showing consulting payments to local officials, including Ethan Vance. By the end of that week, 4 arrests were made. Leonard Vance, Ethan Vance, 2 Clearview executives. The charges? Fraud, bribery, and manslaughter. in the death of Thomas Merritt. When I saw it on the news, I didn't cry.
I just sat in the quiet of the farmhouse, looking at Thomas's photo on the mantel, the one of him holding his camera mid-laugh. Justice had come, but it came with a price. My children still didn't call. My neighbors still whispered. The damage to my reputation wouldn't fade overnight. But for the first time in years, I didn't care. Because when the truth stands, you don't need approval, only peace. Later that night, Cal called. His voice was trembling with excitement. "Rachel, the film, it's developed." I held my breath. "What was on it?" He paused. "The last frame. It's a picture of you." "Me?" He sent it to me. It was a photo Thomas had taken through the farmhouse window, me in the garden, watering the flowers, sunlight in my hair. Below it, scrawled in his handwriting, were 4 words. "She'll finish what I started." For a long time, I stared at that picture. Then I printed it, framed it, and hung it in the same spot where the intruders had shattered the last one. This time, I wasn't afraid of who might see it. The truth was out, and so was I. The world has a strange way of going quiet after a storm. For weeks, my phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, investigators, even complete strangers, calling to thank me for having courage. But when the headlines moved on, when the cameras left the dusty roads of Elk County and the buzz faded, the quiet came again. Only this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. 3 months after the arrests, the FBI returned to my farmhouse. 2 agents, both young, both respectful, came to walk me through the final evidence that tied everything together. "The toxicology confirmed your suspicions. Your husband was poisoned. The substance was traceable to an unregistered batch of antifreeze distributed through a company owned by Vance Holdings." I'd prepared myself for those words, but hearing them aloud still knocked the air from my lungs. "He didn't die of a heart attack?" "No, ma'am, he didn't." My hands trembled as I folded them in my lap. I wasn't crying, not exactly. The tears didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Because now, I could finally grieve the truth, not the lie I'd been told. The trials began in the fall. Leonard and Ethan Vance were charged with fraud, money laundering, environmental conspiracy, and second-degree manslaughter in connection with Thomas's death. Their lawyers tried everything: insanity pleas, procedural loopholes, character assassinations, but the evidence was overwhelming. The photographs, the recordings, the ledgers, the film roll. Even the burnt frame, the one left behind during the break-in, was entered as Exhibit F, its charred edges a silent symbol of what they tried to erase. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all major counts. Ethan Vance got 25 years, Leonard, 20. When the verdict was read, Ethan looked at me from across the courtroom, not with hatred, but disbelief, as if the idea of being held accountable was a foreign concept. I didn't look away. Afterward, Mara and I sat outside the courthouse on the stone steps. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of rose and gold. "It's over," she said softly. "Not quite," I replied. "Not until they stop owning people's silence." She smiled at that. "You're not done fighting, are you?" "Not yet," I said.
Thomas didn't die for them to pay fines. He died for the truth to change something. A month later, I stood in front of a small crowd at a local university auditorium. Mara had convinced me to speak at a seminar for young environmental journalists. My knees shook, my palms were slick, but when I saw the faces of those students, eager, angry, idealistic, I found my voice. I was 53 when I realized that silence is a weapon. Thomas was one man with a camera. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He just wanted people to see. That's what you do. You make people see. Don't ever underestimate what one frame, one truth, one voice can do. When I finished, the students stood and applauded, but what mattered most wasn't the applause. It was the spark in their eyes. Winter came to Montana early that year. Snow draped the fields like forgiveness. My children came for Christmas. For the first time in years, they didn't arrive out of obligation or pity. They came home. Marcus hugged me first, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Mom. I believed what they said about you. I was afraid to lose my job, afraid to be embarrassed. You didn't just prove them wrong. You proved me wrong." I smiled through tears. Then maybe I did something right. Emily followed, holding my hands between hers. "I found Dad's photo journals. He wrote about you on every page. He knew you'd finish this." That night, we sat by the fire, the warmth wrapping us in quiet understanding. Sophie, my granddaughter, played softly on the piano, her fingers tracing melodies that sounded like peace. For the first time in years, the farmhouse didn't echo, it sang. The following spring, I got a letter from the Washington Herald. Cal Roberts' piece, The Last Frame, had been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in investigative journalism. My name was in the footnotes, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that people were reading, learning, remembering. Mara called that night, laughing through tears. "Rachel, you're going to be in textbooks." "I don't want fame. I want reform." And that's exactly what followed.
Congress opened hearings into Clearview Energy's environmental violations. Several states launched new transparency bills for rural land acquisition, and a scholarship fund was established in Thomas's name, the Merritt Fellowship for Environmental Truth. Every year, it funds one journalist to investigate corruption in forgotten places. But peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in smaller moments, like the morning I woke to find sunlight streaming through the kitchen, the same way it had the day Thomas died. I brewed my coffee, walked to the porch, and saw the bluebird he'd loved to photograph. It landed on the same fence post, unbothered, whole, free. I smiled. Later that afternoon, Mara stopped by with a new frame. Walnut, polished, simple. "For the photo," she said, "the one Thomas left you." I replaced the old, cracked frame with this one, wiping away the dust. The picture, me in the garden, sunlight on my face, seemed almost alive now. Underneath it, I added a small engraved plaque. "The truth is never buried. It waits." Sometimes I still get letters from strangers, from widows, from women who've been silenced in small towns and large corporations alike. One said, "I watched your story. My husband's death was called an accident too. I'm starting to ask questions." Another, "You reminded me that age doesn't mean weakness. Thank you for showing me that quiet doesn't mean powerless." Each letter reminds me that Thomas's camera didn't just capture truth, it passed it on. On the anniversary of his death, I drove out to the ridge where he took most of his photographs. The air smelled of pine and frost. I set down his Leica on the ground and whispered, "We did it, love. Justice served." The wind stirred, carrying with it a whisper, faint, warm, almost like laughter. I turned toward the horizon, watching the last sliver of sunlight fade behind the mountains, and then, as if guided by something beyond chance, I lifted my own camera, the one Cal had given me after the trial, and took a photo. A simple frame. The last frame. Just light, sky, and memory. Epilogue. Months later, the last frame won the Pulitzer. Cal dedicated the award to a woman who proved that truth doesn't age. They asked me for a statement. I kept it short. I'm not a hero. I'm a witness. The truth doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone brave enough to face it. And so here I am, 53 years old when this began, 55 now. I still live in the farmhouse. The porch creaks, the wind hums through the rafters, and every morning the light hits that framed photograph just right. Thomas is gone, but he's everywhere. In every quiet victory, every headline, every breath of peace. I used to think the world ended when I lost him. Now I know that's when it began.